This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Rabbi Pfeiffer, for the very warm introduction. I want to thank Rabbi Kringsman for inviting me to join you this morning. Bershus the Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Bajnan Shlita. It's really a great honor and privilege to be together with you and to share with you Divrei Torah, Divrei Halacha. I see so many Chashuva parents, Gedolei Rabbanim, just of the neighborhood, who are present in the room. Who am I to share with you Divrei Halacha in such an impressive gathering? But B'schus Harabim together, perhaps we could get a little bit of a flavor and a little bit of a taste for the beauty of the Halachic process and the beauty of a sugya, which is really Noigea and is in Yana D'Yoma. So first, allow me to be the first to wish all of you a Happy New Year. But it's not what you're thinking. I don't mean the secular New Year. I mean Rosh Chodesh Shvat is coming. And of course, when Mashiach will come, we will paskin like Beis Shammai that Rosh Chodesh Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Lo Ilonos. So I could already feel the Kedusha of the upcoming Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which is the Rosh Hashanah for Ilonos Haba Aleinu L'Taiva. But all kidding aside, what we've come here this morning to discuss is the secular calendar in Halacha. Is one permitted to utilize a secular calendar, be it the months of the year, to ascribe numbers to the secular months of the year, and to use the secular year? So let's begin with the pasuk in Parsha Boy, coming up soon. The first Maramakom on your sheet. Vayemer Hashem al Moshe v'al Aaron b'Eretz Mitzrayim lemar hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chadashim rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana. This month will be for you the first of the months. The first it should be for you for the months of the year. And Rashi says, the famous principle of Rashi that Rashi enunciates for the very first time in Bereshis Gimel, Pasuk Ches, Rashi says, V'ani loy basi elo l'pshuto shel mikra. My purpose here is just to tell you the simple explanation of the Pasuk. Well, Rashi here also likewise says, Ein mikra yoytze midei pshutai. The pasuk will not be removed from its simple interpretation that the Rebbeinu Shalom is referring to Chodesh Nisan, and he's saying that Chodesh Nisan should be the first of the months of the year, that Nisan should be first, Iyar second, Sivan third, Teves number 10, Shvat 11, and Adar 12. So simply, according to Rashi, it would seem that we would be required to refer to Nisan as the first month, the month Teves that we're in today, the 10th month. And if we were to refer to a different month as a different number, that would seem to be going against that which the Torah tells us here in Parshas Bo, Parak Yud Beis, Pasuk Aleph. And in fact, the Ramban says that why does this mitzvah, why is it introduced with the words B'Eretz Mitzrayim? Vayomer Hashem al Moshe v'al Aaron B'Eretz Mitzrayim. Well, says Rashi, that's because this mitzvah, which is the very first mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael, was not given b'Sinai, it was given in Eretz Mitzrayim. So this mitzvah, the mitzvah of counting Nisan as the first month of the year, is the very first mitzvah in the Torah. Says Ramban, what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is that Klal Yisrael counts Nisan as the first month of the year, Iyar second, in order that it should be a remembrance to the great miracle, the Rebbeinu Shalom taking us out of Mitzrayim. The same way, when we make Kiddush Friday night, it's Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. And when we wear tefillin, it's Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. When we sit in the sukkah, Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. When we eat matzah, Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Well, that's not enough. We need to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim to such a degree as to every time we refer to a month of the year, it's the first month since Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim. The second month. We're now in the 10th month since Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim. This is part of the mitzvah of Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Says the Ramban, the same way we say every morning, Hayom Yom Sheni B'Shabbos, that today is the second day since Shabbos, always to remember Shabbos and the creation of the world. Likewise, we always remember the month that we left Mitzrayim, and always refer to months by the number of which it has been since the month of Nisan, which is the first month of the year, to remember Zikaron L'Ge'ulaseinu, or remembrance for our redemption. again, the Ramban seems to emphasize the fact that this is not only an idea, but this is an actual mitzvah. It's a command. We must say, Nisan is number 1, Iyar is number 2, Teves is number 10. Would it then be an Aveira to refer to a different month of the year as 1 or 2 or 3? And in fact, the Chassam Sofer, in a number of places, let's start with the Torah Moshe, number 4 on your sheets, says, yes, based on this Ramban, it would be inappropriate and wrong to refer to a different month of the year as a different number system, as the Umais Ha'olam do, says the Chassam Sofer, V'zeh toichachas musar. This is an open rebuke for those who write letters or the like, and do not refer to the month of the year from Nisan, and rather refer to other months as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So according to the Chassam Sofer, then, to write on a check, let's say today, 1/1/2018, would be wrong, would be a problem, would be violating this mitzvah according to the Ramban. Now, in this Chassam Sofer, the Chassam Sofer puts it rather mildly. However, elsewhere the Chassam Sofer is not as kind. Chassam Sofer in the Drasha is Chassam Sofer. In his drasha that he gave in 1833 on the 8th day of Teves, Chassam Sofer goes further and he says, he talks about the importance of referring to the month of Nisan as the first month of the year. Says Chassam Sofer, and even worse, what about Yidden who count the number of years not from the creation of the world, but rather from the birth of Yeshu HaNoitzri? As we know, the secular calendar, today was the beginning of 2018. 2018 from what? From the supposed bris milah of the gods, according to the Christians, chas v'shalom. So the secular calendar bases their year based on the bris milah, the Leda of Yeshu HaNoitzri, the Leda being the 25th of December, and the bris milah being on New Year's. Says the Chassam Sofer, how could we dare count the years from the birth of Yeshu? Says the Chassam Sofer, that is wrong. V'loi kichadoshim mikarov shemoinim limei leidas meshicham shal noitzrim halo yevoshu beis Yisrael al temurazu. Shouldn't the Jewish people be embarrassed that instead of counting years by when the world was created, they count years by the birth of Yeshu? And then the Chassam Sofer takes it even further. And in number 6 in the Drashos Chassam Sofer, in Drush for Zayin Av, Tavkuf Ayin, Chassam Sofer says that those who write on a document the year from the birth of Yeshu, and then not only do they write, do they sign their name? You know what they're doing? They're signing away their soul. They're signing Ein Lanu Chelek V'Elokei Yisrael. We have no share in God. We believe in a different God. To write on a document the year, not since Bris Ha'olam, but from the birth of the Christian God, you're basically signing away your soul. You're saying, the Torah Hashem Ma'asu, I despise the Torah, chas v'shalom. So according to the Chassam Sofer, based on the Ramban, to use the secular calendar, be it the month of the year, 1 for January, 2 for February, 3 is wrong and violating the mitzvah according to the Ramban. And even further, to use the secular year according to the Chassam Sofer is not just violating any old mitzvah, if there is no such thing, but it's not just violating a regular mitzvah, but violating one of the basic tenets, one of the basic principles of Yahadus, and that is Emunah and Brias Ha'olam, and you're signing away chas v'sham that in lanu chelek v'elokei Yisrael. Comes the Maharam Shik. Maharam Shik was of Moshe Shik. He was born in 1807. He lived till 1879. Again, limis param. We're using their calculations, and we'll have to get. How could we even say that? By the way, the Chassam Sofer himself lived limis param 1762 to 1839. The Maharam Shik says, to use the secular year, you're actually violating. To use the secular year, you're actually violating another lav, and that lav is v'shem Elohim acherim lo saskiru. Do not mention and do not remember and do not recall other gods. And the same way, you're not to say, "Hey, Yankel, meet me on the corner opposite that church." Meet me over there across the street from the chapel. Meet me over there. You're not allowed to use an Avodah Zarah as a reference point. So then how could you use the birth of Yeshu in terms of calculating years? That's causing people maybe not to say an Avodah Zarah, but to conjure up and to remember and to recall the Avodah Zarah. Therefore, says the Maramshik, Talmud Muvak of Chassam Sofer, it is prohibited to use the secular year. So comes the Be'er Moshe. Be'er Moshe is Rav Moshe Stern, number 8, in Chelek Ches, Siman Yud Ches, and he writes that based on the Chassam Sofer and the Maramshik, one would have to be very careful when they write a check, first of all, not to write 1, 2, 3, 4, referring to January, February, March, and April. Because you're not to ascribe a number other than 1 to Nisan and 2 to Iyar. You can't call January 1, February 2. What you would have to do is, says the Be'er Moshe, Rav Moshe Stern, the Debretziner Rav, whose father was Rav Avram Stern, a great Rav and a historian. He wrote Melitzei Eish. Says Rav Moshe Stern, he says one would have to write January, February, March, April, instead of writing 1, 2, 3, 4. And he says when it comes to the year, instead of writing 2018, just write the last two numbers, 18 or 018. And he says he knows from experience, he's always written just the last two digits, and never was a check returned. Unless, of course, there was not enough money in the bank. But that's a different story. But he says this is his practice, again, to write January, February, not to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be violating HaChodesh Hazel Lachem according to Ramban and Chassam Sofer, and not to actually write out the name, the exact year, 2018, 1980. Write 80, right, or 080, or write 18 or 018. Okay. In fact, the Rav Moshe Stern writes that he once got a receipt from Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, and they wrote the secular date. So he told the administrator, "Show this to your Rosh Yeshiva." I mean, are you kidding me? You're writing the secular date? You can't do that. You can't use the month in a number ascribed to the month, and you can't just say out the year. But what we would like to discuss today is we know that it is the practice of many Yereim Ushleimim, many God-fearing Jews, many observant Jews, many knowledgeable Jews, to make use of the secular calendar, be it when they write documents or a government document or a tax return or even kids writing homework, they will write 1, 2, 3. Is that permitted? Is there any basis for that? And they will make use of the secular year. So is this a real prohibition? According to the Chassam Sofer, it would seem to be quite a serious one. Well, comes Rabbi Avadia Yosef, Hagoyin Rabbi Avadia Yosef, see my good friend, Rabbi Iran Gohari, who when I was a Rav in Queens, he would provide me with all of Rabbi Avadia's Sfarim. They just came out with a new volume of Yabi Omer, Chelek Yud Aleph. And Rabbi Avadia says, in his opinion, there is no problem to use the secular year for the following reason. Number one, says Rabbi Avadia, our tradition is that Yeshu HaNoitzri was not born in the year 1 of the Common Era. Our tradition is, we know the Churban Beis HaMikdash was in the year, anybody know what year the Churban Beis HaMikdash was? In the year 68, and Rabbi Avadia gives a mnemonic. You know how you remember it was the year 68? When we had no Beis HaMikdash, we had no Chayim. Chayim is Gematria 68. That's how you remember. You subtract 68 from the calendar in the year 68. Now, our tradition is, writes the Sefer HaEshkal, that Yeshu was hung 135 years before the Churban. Abar Banel says about 151 years before the Churban. So our tradition is that Yeshu was long gone 60, 70, or 80 years before they say he was even born. So their calculation is a historical inaccuracy. What they say, it's a complete fabrication. By the way, even according to their claim, their Moedah, he wasn't born in the year 1. Their Moedah, it was either in the year 3 to 4 BCE or 6 to 7 BCE. Therefore, says Rav Avadia, it is clear when somebody uses a secular date, he's not even referring to the date, the year that Yeshu was born, because he wasn't born that year. It's just a matter of convenience. It's a date and a year that has been agreed upon to start counting again. But we're not referring to his birth, because according to our tradition, he wasn't born then. Says Rabbi Avadia, and even if you say But since this is their date, and according to their tradition, it's referring to when he was born, so now you might be violating walking in the ways of the Goyim. Says Rabbi Avadia, you have to understand what you think every time we do something that a Goy does, you're violating Let me ask you a question. In New York, it's freezing outside. It's like 7 degrees outside. So Gentiles wear coats. So is it an Aveira to wear a coat today? Because Goyim wear a coat? Oh, you can't take off your coat. Goyim wear coats. It's a Goyish shazach to wear a coat. No, of course not. Well, why? So it says, Rabbi, you have to look in the Ramah. The Ramah quotes the Maharik. The Maharik teaches us that there are 2 categories of something that falls under Uvechukaiseyam loiseilecho. Number 1, something that Goyim do, beli tam, without a reason, just as a chayk, like a superstition. For example, a Gentile, if they see a black cat walking by, they think it's a bad omen, they won't go do what they were planning on doing. So for a Yud to refrain from doing something because a black cat passed by, that's wrong. That's wrong because the guy is not doing it for a logic, he's doing it for an empty reason. It's just a superstition. Or, says the Maharik, something that a Gentile does out of pritzas, out of low character, out of immoral behavior. Let's say they wear certain clothing which is immodest, not just for men, not just for women. Let's even for men. Let's say Goyim wear a certain type of shirt and it's open. It's a certain type of immodest look. So even for a man to wear that, that's uvechukaiseyam loiseilechu. But says Rabbi Avadia, to use a secular calendar, that's not uvechukaiseyam loiseilechu. We're not using it because Goyim don't use it for an empty reason, and Goyim don't use it for a immoral reason. It's just a convenient reference point that everybody's agreed upon to start counting the years. And therefore, says Rav Avadia, there is no Isser whatsoever. Isser mamish lo shamanu. Therefore, ein soirech limchos v'hanoyagin came. You do not have to protest against those who use it. The Chassam Sofer and the Maram Shik were very machmer about this. Says Rabbi Avadia, and this is something that the Tzitz Eliezer also observes, that the prohibition of using the secular calendar is something that we find for the first time among the Poskim in Hungary, where they were specifically fighting a certain movement, the Reform movement. These are Jews who try to break away from tradition and the Messiah of Klal Yisrael, and they were trying to drop minhagim, and they were trying to drop Yiddish pride, and they were trying to drop Torah min hashamayim, and as part of that abandonment of Yiddishkeit, they wanted to bedafka use a secular calendar. And that's why the Chassam Sofer and his Talmidim fought against using the secular calendar b'chol toikef with all of their force. But in a society where we don't have to specifically combat reform, says the Chassam Sofer, says Rabbi Avadia, Isser mamish lo shamanu. You can't say it's mamish asr to use the secular year. And he does say, though, to refer to the months of the year as 1, 2, 3, 4, one should try to avoid doing that. It's better to write January, February, than to write 1 and 2. And therefore his conclusion is as follows. Ladina, there's no Isser min adin, and those who are lenient have what to rely on. But it is preferable, and if there's not a pressing need, why not use the Jewish month? Why not use a Jewish year? Obviously, if you're writing a check, then you're going to have to write either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or January, February, so use January, February. You're going to have to use the year, so you use the year. And Rabbi Kriegsman assured me that any check that the parents write out to the yeshiva, they'll accept. No chumras. Don't worry about it. You could always use that. And if you want to be machmir, the yeshiva will accept cash as well. But be it as it may, Rabbi Avadia Shita is, it's not usur. Certainly in an ideal world, why not use the Jewish calendar? So let me share with you a few possible reasons and rationales of what many people perhaps are relying on by not being makmid to avoid using the secular calendar. What I'm going to share with you now comes from the Sefer Minchas Asher of Rav Asher Weiss, and he offers a few really ingenious a way of being Melitz Tov, a way of defending the practice of God-fearing people who do make use of the secular calendar. First of all, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Gimel, on the Mishnah that says that Echad B'Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for months, the Gemara says, what's the nafkamina that's Rosh Hashanah for months? And Ruba de Ruba de Ruba of the Rishonim, they explain as follows. They explain the nafkamina is to know how to establish the order of the Yamim Tovim, starting with Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Why do they explain the Gemara that way? Why don't you say the nafkamina is? Nafkamina, knowing that Nisan is the first month of the year, is that Nisan is 1, and Iyar is 2, and Sivan is 3. Why specifically is the nafkamina regarding the order of the Yamim Tovim? Elamai, most Rishonim hold that you're not required to refer to Nisan as 1, Iyar as 2, Sivan as 3. Because, says Rav Asher Weiss, look in the Rambam. Does the Rambam say there's a mitzvah in the Torah to call Nisan 1, Iyar 2, Sivan 3? Does the Shulchan Aruch bring it down? Why isn't it brought in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch? Because they don't agree with the Ramban. They hold there is no such mitzvah. And if you don't use the Jewish month numerals, instead you use secular January, February 1, 2, 3, it's not a problem. The mitzvah of Achodesh Elohim is just to teach you the order of the Moyadim. And that could be a rationale why many are not noyeg to avoid using the secular calendar. Another possible logic, and this is really a brilliant logic, and this Rav Asher Weiss says as follows. When the Torah says refer to the month of Nisan as the first month of the year, what's a month? A month is not a group of approximately 30 days. A month is a lunar cycle. A lunar cycle, that's a month. There's no other definition to month other than a lunar cycle. We know every month the moon revolves around the earth. Fine. That means, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, that a lunar cycle is 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalakim. That is the only definition of a month. You could round it off to 29 or 30, depending on the month, but it's a lunar cycle. Now, the Jewish calendar is a lunar cycle. The secular calendar is a solar calendar. Are there months in the secular calendar? Only for sake of convenience. So we have 30 days, 31 days, 28 days. But they're not really months. They're just groupings of days that happen to be called months. So if we call January the first month, we're not calling a different month number 1. It's not a month. It's just a collection of days. Says Rav Asher Weiss, let's say the Gentiles decided that every 10 days is a month. So we couldn't call this 10 days 1 and the next 10 days 2. They're not months, but they call it month. You call whatever you call anything, whatever you want. But it's not a month. A month is a lunar cycle. And therefore, to use a secular calendar, which is a solar calendar, and the months are fake months, they're not real months, there's nothing wrong with referring to January as 1. It's just the first of collection of days within the solar year. But it's not a real month. If we were using a different lunar calendar and referring to a different lunar month, as the first month, that would be a problem. But not within the solar calendar. And then finally, Rav Asher Weiss says, Meira Heter, based on Rashi, it's quoted as Rashi, who explains as follows. And last night I saw this in Rav Asher Weiss' Sefer, and I thought it was good, and then I woke up this morning and said, no. Well, here, it goes as follows. Rashi says, as quoted, that, wait a second, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, says this Rashi, that according to Rabbi Eliezer, that the world was created in Tishrei. What does it mean, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem? That even though the world is created in Tishrei, but Nisan's the first month, but it's not the beginning of the year, but it's the first month. It says Rashi, but according to Rabbi Shiur, that the world is created in Nisan, the Torah is not saying that Nisan is the first month, the Torah is saying this is the beginning of the year. Kipshutai, this is the beginning of the year. Meaning, according to Rabbi Shiur, the Torah is not saying make sure you count Nisan as the first month. It's just saying this is the beginning of the year. It's only in Rabbi Eliezer that the Torah is saying that even though the year has not begun now, the year begins the year begins, even though the year does not begin now, but the first month begins now. And who did Paskin like? Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shua. Now we usually Paskin like Rabbi Shua, because Rabbi Lezer is a Shmutzi, Rabbi Lezer is a Talmud of Shammai. That means if we pass like Rabbi Shua, and it happens to be Tosfos says we pass like Rabbi Lezer, but most Rishonim say we pass like Rabbi Shua. And according to this Rashi, according to Rabbi Shua, the Torah is not saying that Nisan's the first month of the year. The Torah is just saying this is the beginning of the year. Since we pass like Rabbi Shua, therefore there is no commandment b'chlal to count Nisan as the first month of the year. But then I woke up this morning and I said, what do you mean Rashi? There's no such Rashi. Rashi doesn't say this. This whole thing, Rashi doesn't say this. And I went to look up, and sure enough, Rashi doesn't say HaChadesh Tazel Lachem is only Rabbi Lezer, not Rabbi Shua. So I'm looking around, it has to be a different Rishon, and sure enough, it's the Rashbam. Okay, so according to the Rashbam, though, there would be a nice Ma'or Heter to use a secular calendar, and that is based on the fact that the whole commandment that the Ramban is bringing down is only in the world of Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Shua, there's no such command. Be it as it may, there are many rationales to be used, to be lenient, and to be able to use a secular calendar. As Rav Adia says, Me'ikar din it's mutter. Certainly, if somebody does use it, yesh lahem al mi lismaich ve'in limchais biyadam. If you are Talmidei Chasam Sofer and you come from that you hail from the Chachmei Hungaria, so you follow Minhagei Chasam Sofer, and certainly it's more ideal. But I just want to point out, most poskim do say, including Rosh Hashanah Zalman Auerbach, quoted over here, number 13, the Kavetz Beis Aaron B'Yisrael, and including, as we mentioned, Rabbi Vadia, that it's still preferable when writing a check or writing a document not to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, but rather January, February, March, and April. Now it happens to be Tzitz Eliezer disagrees, and Tzitz Eliezer says there might be a problem to use the names of the month because they are the names of perhaps Roman or Greek gods, but most poskim say that is preferable than to use the numbers. And we could argue on the Tzitz Eliezer possibly that even our own months of the year, Tammuz is also a name of a Persian god. So the consensus of most poskim is that to use a secular calendar, it's mutter. And if you see someone using it, don't think lowly of them. Yesh lavam mi lismaich, mihiyois toiv. Certainly when you're in a yeshiva, and you don't have the pressure of having to write on certain official documents, there's no reason as much as possible to use the Jewish calendar. And when necessary, it would be preferable to use the names of the month rather than the numbers. But again, I'm sure whatever donation you offer to the yeshiva, they will be makabel bi'ahava. And let me just share with you one way possibly to avoid the whole issue. The Kloisenberger Rebbe said one way to avoid using the secular year is at the end of the year you write Lamed, Reish, Ayin. And what does that stand for? What that stands for is Lileidas Rabbi Akiva. Because who else was born at the same time, 2018 years ago? Rabbi Akiva. So instead of remembering Yeshu HaNoitzri, by writing Lamed, Reish, Ayin, you'll remember Rabbi Akiva. And by the way, what are we doing here today? We've gotten together for Torah for one moment, for 1 hour, for a Reva Shah, for Shah Achas. As we know, Yesh Kaina Oilama B'Shah Achas, Rashi Tevois, Rabbi Akiva. Akiva is Rashi Tevois. Yesh Kaina Oilama B'Shah Achas. So I thank all of you for joining me for the Shah Achas, Yofa Shah Achas, Shel Torah Masan Torah Mazeh, Mikol Chai Olam Haba. I wish everyone bracha v'atzlacha, siyata d'shmaya, lahagdil Torah lahadira.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.